Think about the Daniel Webster quote on the screen. What does it say about the power of rhetoric? The power of rhetoric is formidable. Hitler is famous for noting that more people are amenable to rhetoric than any other force. And he's right. Because rhetoric is incredibly powerful, people who choose to engage in rhetoric should be very careful to consider the ethics of their speech. Your book chapter does a good job of addressing some of the basics of ethics, but I'd like to add some ideas as well in this presentation. First of all, you must recognize the power of the lectern. While it's true that Hitler eventually conquered many of his own people and the people of other nations through force, he came to power and convinced many of his nation to stand behind him through his rhetoric. Even when you're only speaking to a small community group, you have the power to influence people's thoughts and behaviors, and that's a good deal of power to have. So be sure that you use that power ethically when it's your turn to stand at the lectern. Being an ethical speaker means that you've done your research. You've left no stone unturned, and you're bringing the best available information to your listeners. When I was a college student working for the AIDS Resource Center in Dallas, I was given presentations to groups at a time when AIDS was still a death sentence, and many people still believed you could acquire HIV through water fountains or mosquitoes. What would have been the impact of someone going to the organization I went to with the wrong information about HIV and AIDS? Given that HIV and AIDS weren't topics that were regularly talked about, and given that the title of the group I was speaking for was the AIDS Resource Center, imagine the damage someone could do if a group of people trusted that speaker to give them correct information about HIV and AIDS, and the speaker didn't give them the best and most up-to-date information possible. Someone could have made a decision that literally cost them their lives. So, as I just said, even in small community presentations, you can have an enormous amount of power. Make sure that you've done your research and that you're giving people the best information possible. You also need to develop the habit of justice as a speaker. This means that you select facts carefully and are also careful not to conflate facts with opinions. It also means that you don't distort or conceal information that questions your position. If you find information that challenges your thinking, think about it some more. Maybe you should change the way you think, and there's nothing wrong with being open-minded and being willing to change your perspective when you're given new information. If you find information that challenges your perspective and it doesn't make you change your mind, you should still consider mentioning it in the speech to show that you've considered all other opinions. It also gives you an opportunity to challenge that information publicly, so that others may run across it later will also have some arguments in mind when they confront a differing perspective. Ignoring or hiding information isn't ethical, and in the end, chances are good that if you do, you'll get caught doing it and will lose credibility, or maybe even your job, once it's discovered that you ignored important information. The freedom that we all appreciate so much in this country was garnered by people who were willing to rock the boat. Where would we be as a nation had Rosa Parks not been willing to stay seated when she was asked to move to the back of the bus? Or had the students at the lunch counter in Montgomery, Alabama not refused to get up from that counter when they were told that it was for white people only? For change to happen, people have to be willing to rock the boat. If something needs to be said and you need to say it, consider this statement. If you can take the worst, take the risk. I understand that in some instances you can't take the worst that could come to you if you rock the boat. Most of us can't afford to lose a job because we're willing to say something unpopular that needs to be said. But if you can take the worst, please consider taking the risk. Look around at the world and all the people who don't enjoy the freedoms that we enjoy and who often die fighting for freedoms that we often take for granted. And remember that without people being willing to rock the boat in our country, we might very well be in the same position as those around the world still fighting for basic human rights. If you can take the worst, please consider taking the risk and rocking the boat. Later on in the semester, we're going to talk about appropriate ways to use emotion in your arguments, so it's definitely something that you can use in rhetoric. But emotional appeals should underscore or supplement logical, rational thinking, not replace it. It's very easy, actually too easy, to get people to react out of emotions like fear. But it's not ethical to do so unless you've also balanced that fear appeal with some reasoned argumentation. So please remember that emotion should supplement your good reasons, not replace them. So even though Voltaire really made the statement first, we all probably know this quote from Spider-Man, and it was great advice from Peter Parker's uncle. It's good advice for you too. Don't forget the responsibility you have to be an ethical speaker and the damage you can do if you're not ethical in your speech. Have a strong ethical grounding in your speech preparation and delivery, and you have the ability to do some amazing things that would even impress Spider-Man.